In this video, I'm going to go over the equipment that I use and some various exercises and sort of obstacles that I encountered in pursuing strength training with a connective tissue disorder. I was originally going to do more videos about like exercises and stuff, like, you know, approaching pull-ups, but I've realized that there's a lot of bad information out there, and I don't want to contribute to it. I would rather be kind of conservative in what I share, and hopefully not give any bad advice that ends up getting anyone injured. That being said, you know, I'm not a qualified source of information. You should be going to your doctor, physical therapist, and beyond that, there are a lot of folks, you know, say on YouTube with decades of training experience, physical therapy, work experience, great knowledge of anatomy and that sort of thing. So by making this video mostly about equipment, I hope that nobody will get the impression that this is a comprehensive explanation of how to perform any of these exercises, and you'll be going elsewhere for, you know, cues on how to perform them, figuring out which exercises are appropriate for you, you know, how many reps to do, how many sets, how long to rest, that sort of thing. I'm going to touch on these topics, but I hope it's clear that this isn't a comprehensive source of information, and that you know, you should just kind of take it as it is and look elsewhere for better information. So that being said, I've got a pretty long list of stuff, and now that I have it laid out in front of me, I do have quite a bit of equipment, probably more than I need. But because I've got my connective tissue as a barrier to exercise, I really want to eliminate all the other barriers. And so, you know, most folks, if they're getting into exercising, they can do just body weight exercises and they can make do with whatever equipment they have. You know, as long as you got something to pull, you know, you can do bed sheet rows in a door frame. You can do dips between chairs. You can make do without all the different equipment that I have here. But, you know, I found that as I encountered different barriers and certain exercises, that having alternate exercises and alternate equipment setups really gave me the flexibility necessary to keep progressing and not just get stopped whenever I hit a wall in any particular exercise. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to start out with some sort of like miscellaneous stuff. I like to have a place to rest. This isn't as much of an issue anymore because I usually remain standing during my workouts. But early on, you know, I might do 20 minutes of work and 40 minutes of laying on the floor, recovering from those exercises. So one thing that I found really helpful was just making a blanket rectangle, or towels work too. Just a rectangle a little bit bigger than my torso that I can lay down on, and my head rests on the floor and the rest of my torso is just slightly elevated. It's not dramatic, but it's enough that it puts my head in a nice neutral position. And I can also put my arms out to the side for a gentle chest stretch. And I found it a great relief when I had neck pain. So even outside of my workouts, this is something I'll use to have a spot to lay on the floor, you know, a place to lay down besides my bed. I guess I'll mention some apps. I like to have like round timers. They'll be called like round timers or boxing timers. Basically, it's just a timer where you set the length of the round. Let's say you set it to a minute, and then you can adjust the break length. So you can say, I want to do a minute of work and 3 minutes of rest, or, you know, 45 seconds of work and 2 minutes of rest. And you can set it to however you want, and then you'll have a bell go off that says time to start your next round, time to, you know, switch to rest. And it can give you, for example, like a 15-second warning. So if you set it to 60 seconds and you hear the warning bell, you know you made it to 45. So for example, if you're trying to land in between 45 and 60 seconds for your time under tension for a particular exercise, then you know you want to make it at least to the warning bell, you know, and if you find you make it to the end of the round, 60 seconds, and you can still go farther, then maybe you want to ramp up the intensity to keep you landing in between that 45 to 60, just as an example. I do have a speaking stopwatch app that just says 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And that can be helpful if I'm doing something like a body line drill where I'm holding an isometric position. I use those for wall planks, which I think I'll touch on later. So it can be handy. I don't have a specific recommendation, but there are plenty of apps out there. And then I also use the Six Pack Promise app from AthleanX. And it's a kind of intense but well-rounded workout for your core. And so once I started hitting 60 seconds on the bodyline drills, I switched over to that for when I want to do a core workout. Because it's very time effective and it's a good, well-balanced workout that hits your core in all the appropriate ways. In the miscellaneous category, I found wrist straps really helpful early on. I had a lot of trouble, especially with pulling motions, things like rows, where my wrists would really give me a lot of pain. And I knew they would be a barrier long term, and they could potentially make or break my training, where if I couldn't get my grip strength to really a pretty high level, then doing pull-ups was just off the table. But on the other hand, straps, and the other thing would be athletic tape, the rigid tape, not the stretchy stuff. I would just, wrap my wrists. I would do the tape and the wrist braces, and between the two, I could really stabilize my wrists. So if I was having trouble, I would just put on the wrist braces and carry on. But then later on in my isolation work towards the end of my workout, I would definitely do some grip training to make sure I was addressing that issue and that it wasn't going to be a shortcoming long term. So it just goes around your wrist here, attaches your forearm, and then the strap transfers some of the force as you're pulling. You can also get rigid ones, and you could even, if you're using resistance bands, you could even put the ankle straps around your forearm if you felt that was a good option for you. Another thing that's helpful is a log. I used apps at first, but eventually I found that since I need some flexibility in how I program my workouts, that having a pencil and paper was a lot more effective, and I could write down 10 of this, or 5 with body weight, 5 negatives, that sort of thing. The next thing would be resistance bands. This is a pretty standard set. I think these are Autoland. I don't really have a brand recommendation. But having a set of resistance bands I think is really, really helpful, because you can use them as alternatives for a lot of strength progressions. If you're working up to, let's say, pull-ups, I found that anchoring resistance bands straight overhead and then just simulating the pull-up motion was really the best option for me. You can do lat pull downs, you can do negatives and stuff, but just putting all my resistance bands together and then just pulling like that really got me all the way up to pull up negatives, and and I think that was really a good option for me. And also, one thing that people don't mention much with resistance bands is that you can really adjust the intensity if you arrange them in different ways. So for example, my lightest one, this yellow one, and then I attach it in series to my second lightest one, this blue one. Then by putting them in series, I made it even stretchier and easier, and you also smooth out the resistance curve, so you don't get that peak intensity so pronounced at the stretch position. So if I'm doing something like rotator cuff exercise, I'll do the 2 bands and have the anchor, 12 feet away from me, and then I'm just going like this. And so that really dials down the intensity to a safe level for these small muscles, while still giving a nice smooth resistance curve. So you can get creative with your resistance bands and how you set them up. I hit kind of a wall with my push-ups. I was doing incline push-ups. You just start against a wall, and then a counter, and then the back of a couch, and then the arm of a couch. And then you go down to parallettes or the floor. And when I was getting down here, I found that I had the strength for it, but I was getting pain. I was getting pain between my shoulder blades. and I just wasn't feeling very stable. I added in some like chest crossovers where I was doing stuff like this with resistance bands. And I would just do one arm at a time, and I found that I could load it up and I could really work it without getting that pain. And so I did that for a while, and then I came back and did the push-ups, and lo and behold, I could handle a higher intensity without pain. The other type of band that I'll use is something like this. These are TheraBands, and they're good bands. They maybe are a little more expensive than they need to be. I got these from a physical therapist, which was really great because I got nice long ones, and they're long enough that if I want to, I can double them up, and it's still a functional length. So I can do my warm-ups, and I can customize it, and that's all I have to say about that. One other type of band is these loops. These would be for like band walks, if you're walking sideways with the band around your hips. Next up is gymnastic rings. I really like my gymnastic rings. So these are from Black Mountain Products. I wrapped athletic tape around them, and that gives me a little bit more comfortable grip. Not everybody would probably like the curved surface. You could get something that had a handle more like the resistance bands, or I'll show you, I've got a setup where I actually use those handles too. But the gymnastic rings come with straps, and they're adjustable, so I can set these at a pretty high for pull-ups. I can adjust them down for incline rows. I could even use these for push-ups and things like dips. I really pretty much just use them for pull-ups and rows. I found that push-ups on gymnastic rings were fine. I kind of liked having a little bit of freedom with my wrists, but your arms are floating around and they're wanting to be pulled in a number of different directions. And that stability that you have to provide is valuable, and certainly something I'd like to train in some areas of my workout. But when I'm doing a strength progression, I want to be able to use my strength and challenge my strength. So having sort of a wobbly, unstable foundation doesn't seem conducive to my goals in that situation. Whereas when I'm pulling, it's really nice to be able to rotate my wrists. I've also got a doorway pull-up bar, and in the neutral grip position, it's fine, but I don't like a straight bar doing like overhand or underhand, because if my wrist can rotate, everything goes fine. I've also got, I got a lot of just like webbing or strapping, and so I made two like extensions, and what I do is I attach them to my gymnastic rings, which are set pretty high at a nice height for pull-ups, and then I attach my resistance band handles, and then with the extension and the handle, it's at a nice height for incline rows. Another thing I'll do is use the extensions and just like drape a long sleeve shirt over it, and then I'll grip that and do like rows with it, and it's a challenge for my grip strength as well as doing the rows. And it's at that point my grip strength is really the weakest link, so it's mostly a grip exercise, but it's sort of a unique challenge, and I liked that as an approach to grip training. Another random thing that's nice to have is like towels or blankets. I like to put something underneath my elbow if I'm doing, for example, a rotator cuff exercise, or even for curls. It's nice to have something that keeps your elbow out at more of a natural carry angle. Moving on here, so adjustable dumbbells. There are different styles for these. I got the type where it's just the bar in the center, and then the plates can be taken off, and I got 5-pound plates and 3-pound plates, and then the bar itself is a few pounds. And the thing I like about it is the flexibility, where I can take these 5-pound plates and they fit on my barbell. Or if I'm doing like a drop set or something, I can use the barbells or the dumbbells, say at like 9 pounds with 2 3-pound plates plus the bar, and then drop down to just like a 5-pound plate, and I can use the plate on its own. The other nice thing about it is that you can arrange the plates in whatever way you want. So I like to do like an uneven dumbbell wrist rotation, where I'll do something like this, where I'll have a few pounds on one side, and then I'll rotate my wrist with control. You want to make sure your wrist isn't binding up. If there's a lot of clicking, I'd say do a dry run and make sure you can move safely through a range of motion. Next is kind of a bigger plate. This I found on the curb. I've got another 10-pounder that I found on the curb too. And this one's filled with sand. The big bulky ones typically will be filled with sand rather than being solid metal. And I really like these. I saw these and grabbed them long before I was doing anything with weights. But I thought down the road it might be handy. And what I like about it is that it's a little bit bigger, and I can do exercises like a press, and my hands are locked together. So if I were to do this with dumbbells, having each arm free and floating around just brings some potential instability, and I have to be cautious. Whereas if my hands are locked together, I can do a lot of exercises that I wouldn't typically do if I didn't have that stability. If you wanted a scaled down version, you could literally use a plate, a dinner plate or a pan or something. But I find having my hands locked together really brings some stability and allows me to work harder safely. Okay, so next up is parallettes. Having the parallettes just gives me options. I also would use them for some of the bodyline drills. They're not really helpful for all of them though. And then I'll also use them for wall planks. I do wall planks as a challenge for my vascular system. So what I did is first I worked on developing my upper body strength, pushing motions so that I had that strength. And then I worked on doing wall planks as kind of a technical exercise where I get up into it, hold it briefly, and then try to smoothly and safely dismount. And then I would just lay on the floor, gasping for breath. And then over time, I developed a little bit of a tolerance for it, and I started doing it as more of a vascular endurance challenge, where I would go up into it, hold it for a little bit, come back down, and then stand up. And standing up after being inverted was just a hellish challenge for my vascular system, and really flared up my lightheadedness and the POTS symptoms. And honestly, I thought I was going to die the first time I did it. I would suggest extreme caution with this. Really run it by your doctor. This isn't just a disclaimer. If you have any sort of compromised vasculature, it could be legitimately dangerous. But apparently even healthy people feel like their heads are going to explode. So I kept trying it, and eventually I worked up to doing like 2 repetitions per minute, where I'd be up in the wall plank, stand up, get back up in the wall plank, stand up. And once I worked up to like 5 minutes at 2 repetitions per minute, I started to find my vascular system was a lot more robust. And the other thing is that I would get kind of an athletic response from my vascular system when I was doing this, because it was sort of an intense all hands on deck sort of situation. And then that robust vascular response started to carry over into real world situations, where if I was just getting up out of bed or whatever, I would still get a robust vascular response, and I wouldn't get that fading to black, or at least the alarm bells sort of sensation. It didn't help with the other aspects of dysautonomia, like the light sensitivity, not really much with the nausea when standing, and the weird stuff like that, or temperature intolerance. But as far as just like not blacking out when I stood up, definitely helpful. But I do want to reiterate that this could be potentially dangerous, and even if you think that this is worthwhile, you got to really kind of plan it out and think, okay, maybe I'm doing that in a couple months potentially, but it could certainly be a long ways down the road, even if it's a priority for you. Okay, so up next is my barbell and bench, and I want to say that I found these for free on the curb. I certainly wouldn't have paid money for the bench. The bar, maybe I would have paid $5 for it. But since they were free, I was thrilled to find them. I there's going to be a certain amount of weight, maybe that I can handle, where I don't trust my bench to hold it. You know, I just want to be clear, nobody needs to make fun of my bench. I know it's a crappy little bench, but let me give you a closer look here. So it's kind of the standard setup. It's just a flat bench. It's not adjustable. And then I've got the barbell up here. And the 5-pound plates were from my adjustable dumbbells. I got the 4 10-pound plates, a couple 2.5-pound plates, and I think a 5-pound plate for like $5, which is a great deal. But so I would say, you know, maybe keep an eye out, free, Craigslist, yard sales, that sort of thing. If you think down the road you might want weights. I don't know how far this is going to take me. Probably, you know, maybe at some point next year, if I have another big equipment purchase, it's probably going to be an adjustable bench. I use this, well, I do bench presses, and I like them. I was getting to a point where my push-up progressions were getting kind of awkward, where first I did the incline push-ups and then floor push-ups, and then I was doing like decline push-ups or like incline one-arm push-ups, and they're just kind of awkward. And I felt like, yeah, it's really hard, it's a challenge, and I'm progressing, but I feel like the complexity and the technique required was starting to hold me back. Where with this, I can just put a certain amount of weight on the bar, and it's going to feel just like before, assuming I do the same pacing. And then next time, if I'm up for it, I can just add more weight, and it's a really simple, straightforward way to do it. The downsides are maybe safety. You know, if I'm down here alone, lifting these weights, and I've got to really be confident that if I lower that bar down to my chest that I can get it back up. Whereas if I'm doing a push-up or something, if I lower myself down and I can't push myself back up, I'm just laying on the floor. I'm going to mention my weighted vest. This is a recent purchase, and it was not cheap. This is like $200. But I got the 150-pound model. This is by Cap. And it's really got a lot of capacity, where there's 2 layers in the front and the back, where it can fit up to 50 of these little 3-pound weights. And if you get the cheaper vests, they'll be sand, and you can get, you know, a decent amount of weight out of sand, but it's bulkier. And so I wanted one that wasn't too long, because if I'm doing squats, I don't want one that's going to like bind up and be a hindrance. And the vest is nice and snug. It's 2 pieces, so like the front and the back split apart. And so I can adjust the size of the neck hole. I can really strap it down. And since the weight's just kind of attached to me, it's just like I instantly gained 60 pounds. And so this one can go up to 150 pounds. So it should last me for quite a while. And I'm happy with it. I'm glad I got it. Maybe not a great financial decision, but as far as workouts go, it's really been worthwhile for sure. I do want to mention that I've got it set up so that I'll actually suspend the vest like about the smidgen over where it would rest on my shoulders, and then I'll load the weights up with the vest just hanging in the air, and then I'll climb into it and strap it down, and then I've got an anchor with the webbing that goes over something overhead and then anchors down, and so I unhook it, and then the weight's resting on my shoulders and strapped down to my core, and then I'll do my squats or whatever, and then I'll lift it up good and high, and then I'll attach the anchor, and then I can slip out of it, and the weighted vest will just be floating in the air again. I just wanted to say that you shouldn't be walking around with a weighted vest. When you're walking, your knees get subjected to like 2.8 to 3.1 times your body weight in stress. It can be even worse if you've got, your knees sort of buckling in or out, or it's twisted. This isn't something where you go jogging with a weighted vest on. It's a terrible, terrible idea. The next thing, this is actually like a weightlifting belt, and I don't really use it for that much. I think the idea is that it kind of clamps down your core, sort of in the same way your TVA should be doing. And I think people use it to like increase their inter-abdominal pressure, to increase their lifts or something. I'm not sure how much I want to increase my inter-abdominal pressure, to be honest. I'm not that knowledgeable about it. but I saw this at a thrift store for a couple bucks, and I snatched it up because it's a really secure belt. And then I put a strap around it, and what I do is I attach weights, but then I clip it here, and then I can use it for like weighted dips and things like that. So next up is my dip station. This is another product from Black Mountain Products, and I'm happy with it. It was sort of a gamble because this model, the handles are sort of fixed together. I found there was a little bit of wobble when I first put it together, and it was actually a little bit wider than I wanted. So at first I thought I was going to end up trying to send it back or something. But what I did is I took more strapping and I secured the two sides together and really cinched it down. And that brought in the width enough that it's a good comfortable width for me. The other thing is that typically I like to kind of rotate them out, but this works fine. I like to work at the very edge here, where my thumb's kind of going down the front actually, and that's a comfortable position for me. And so I started out with like support holds, or like leg assisted support holds where like my feet were still on the ground, but I was trying to be accountable and actually do the work with my upper body. And then I would also put a box or something to catch me, and then I would do negatives, where I'd lower myself down slowly with control, and then I would get to a point where it would catch me. And the other benefit of that is that it provides a proprioceptive feedback. So if I'm doing a dip and I get down to a good depth, I can feel, a cushion or something, and then push myself back up. So connective tissue disorders are associated with impaired proprioception. So you can't necessarily trust your body to tell you when you're at the bottom of, for example, a dip. So it's really helpful to have something to catch you. So something like this would be an example. This is just like a little stool. Pillows work too, but you want something that, if it really came down to it, it could support your weight and prevent an injury. Along the same lines as the dips, I'd suggest box squats if you're interested in doing a squat progression. Just having something to catch you is a real safety net and also provides that proprioceptive feedback. Well, you could start with a chair, and I would use this to practice initiating with the hip hinge to kind of counteract the common habitual patterns that you develop just from sort of squatting. Generally, you'll just buckle at the knees, but if you can get some hip hinge, it'll really improve it. But having something there just makes it a little bit easier to trust yourself and know that you're not going to go too far. And then over time, you can go to lower and lower boxes. Am I even over it? So that one's pretty low. And you may have seen my pelvis was starting to tilt under. It's called butt wink. And so I suggest you videotape yourself, and you can see what your form looks like, and determine how deep you should be going and whether you're working at a safe range. And you want to get strong within a safe range, and that strength is going to overlap and give you access to new movements.